The work lives in the questions that you ask yourself, not the answer. Because if you're trying to prescribe getting to the end because you already know the answer, what might you be missing? The beautiful things, the new solutions, the creativity lives in the questions.
Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 1110 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. David.
Rob.
Hello, my friend. Welcome
Hello.
back.
Yes, it's good to be back.
Yes, it is. It is good to be back. We are in for a real treat today. I say that because we're recording on Halloween, so I think I'm just in treat mode.
Do you have your treats ready?
I got all the candies. My kids got the costumes set. We're good to go. I know that's not the season that you're in, but you got to be prepared, right? Kids come by your house for trick-or-treating, don't they?
They do, although they're coming back less and less, which is sad because our neighborhood has grown older and we're in a cul-de-sac, so they may not come up to our cul-de-sac. They'll just stay on the main road because they see some of our first houses in the cul-de-sac end up being dark. Because a lot of our families are older, and so they just don't come up all the way in.
Yeah, the whole guessing the right amount of candy to have for kids and then not wanting to have too many leftovers. For me, I don't want to have leftovers because I don't want my kids to have too much sugar. But you also don't want to, be empty-handed, which is a hard guessing game. So thankfully, that's not our problem to solve. We try to solve a lot of problems in 1110 Leadership Podcast. That's not one of them. So we're just going to throw our hands up and say it's unsolvable. Speaking of solving problems, we've got an amazing guest on the show today. Jes Averhart is joining us. Jes is a friend of both of ours. We go way back. We didn't talk about this in the conversation, but she was one of the impetus for us actually connecting in this work.
Yeah, absolutely.
An invitation to be on that panel way back in the day of a workshop that she was facilitating, which is, we were covering so much ground in the conversation, we didn't even have a chance to go there. We just skipped that.
Right.
Really wonderful. So for our listeners who don't know about Jes, let me just give a quick background. Jes Averhart is a fourth-generation entrepreneur and creator of the Reinvention Road Trip. She's also a three-time award-winning author. She advises high-performing individuals and corporate teams as a master's certified life coach and professional leadership advisor. Over the last few decades, she's worked with a portfolio of Fortune 500 companies, public sector organizations, and high-performing individuals interested in increasing their personal growth and greater professional impact. So she has worked all across the place, folks like Amazon, Kroger, Google for startups, Microsoft, Cisco, United Way, the list goes on, and even more locally, North Carolina Advocates of Justice and Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And that's not even the whole list. Back in 2015, she co-founded Black Wall Street Homecoming, which was a nonprofit aimed at closing the funding gap for Black and Brown tech founders. And earlier in her career, she provided production management services for the likes of the Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns in the NFL, Cleveland Cavaliers, Procter & Gamble, Pepsi. Sorry if you're more of a Coke fan for our listeners. She's originally from Evansport, Ohio, and she moved to North Carolina in 2005 with her son, Trey. And when she's not working, you can find her cheering on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Wow. If that's any indication for our listeners, they are in store for a true treat with this conversation.
Yeah, Jes is next level in every way. It's just really fun to be around her. I always learn something new when I'm with her. She has a way of really inspiring, but also putting concepts in words that are memorable so that as a leader and as she's working with leaders, we can really understand her perspective. And she comes, as her bio tests, with tremendous ground level experience in a variety of different contexts. So that's what she brings to our conversation today around leadership.
Yeah, it was a really impactful conversation. I learned a lot, even just listening from her. And you and I have sat with her in many different spaces and conversations. And so she just is a real gem and a wealth of knowledge. And so real excited for our listeners to be able to glean from her wisdom today. So we'll turn the floor back over to our conversation with Jes. Jes, we're
Hey,
back.
I know. It's like the band is back
The
together.
band
This is
back.
unbelievable. I'm pinching myself. Unbelievable.
How did we get here?
I don't know. We were reminiscing about that offline. This idea that Jes and I used to record a podcast and David was on as a guest. And now we're back, just same song, different verse.
Yeah,
There it
just
is.
change roles.
I love it. It feels very safe and comfortable, and I appreciate this moment. This is going to be the highlight of my day.
Jes, you're one of our favorite people. You light up our world with just your energy, your enthusiasm, your creativity, the way you think about your business and how you're engaging leaders. So we really want to unpack that with you, given this is the 1110 Leadership Podcast, and we've been on this journey with you. And so given all of your work with leaders, we'd love to just start off by saying, what would you say is the state of leadership today with the leaders you're working with? How would you describe the things that you are experiencing with them? And where do you think leadership is headed, given your work with them?
Wow, that's a heavy hitter first question, y'all. But I guess that's what this is.
This is a big time. This is a big time
That's how we used
podcast.
to roll, Jes. We just jumping in.
Yeah.
Just go. Let's go. Let's do this thing. All right. So I again appreciate being on this podcast and with the two of you who I respect a great deal and see you both as visionary leaders, particularly around the work that you're doing at 1110. I think it's pretty clear that it's a it's visionary, and that's where I want to go with this answer to this question. We're in unique times, right? Like I think in the post-COVID world and our political world, there's just a lot happening. And what I'm seeing with the folks that I'm coaching, the women that I coach, and I coach men too, but the companies that I'm working with, there's this craving to get back to value-centered leadership, but not totally sure what does that mean for them as individuals or for their companies, trying to get anchored around what does it mean to serve from a value centered place. And so I think I think there's this kind of misnomer out there that leadership is a wasteland. It's a race to the bottom. It's all these different, it's tangled, it's divisive, it's all these different things. But in my experience, and that's what you're asking, the conversations that I'm having are not that. They are very thoughtful. They're full of concern. I think there's this interest in being the best that you can possibly be, but not having a lot of guidance or models for what does that really look like. And so I'm quite hopeful around leadership, frankly, these days. And that's simply because I think folks are seeking it out. So, this craving for guidance, craving for community, a vision to build and adopt trust. Leadership, as we know, doesn't actually work if people don't trust you. So, it's pointless. And they're really to pull all the layers back. The people that I'm working with are trying to figure out what it is that they can do to instill and model and create trusted teams so that they can impart a long-term vision. Because you can have vision, if you don't have the trust, it doesn't really stand. So those are my thoughts on leadership today, what I'm seeing.
What would you say is driving all of that? Why the pull toward value-centered leadership?
Yeah, I think that the drive towards it is, this is going to sound, the drive towards it, in my opinion, is nostalgia. That probably surprises you, but I think that
Like the good old days? Is that
like
what
the
you
good
mean?
old days, like this sense of, I remember there was a principled leadership model, or there were people in my life who were principled, who led from values, who led from a core, who maybe didn't name their values because that's a new phenomenon. Everybody wants to talk about it. It's faddish a little bit. But if you think about it, if you go back, like I can do it myself, I go back to my grandfather, very principled, very anchored, had values, wasn't blown back and forth to and fro by the wind, right? And Ecclesiastes, that's one of my favorite verses. But this idea of not being like constantly taken on a ride. And I think that people are exhausted and they know that there was some level of safety, some security in that form of leadership. And while it's not being modeled, we know it exists because we've experienced it in our life. And I think that it's the nostalgia that's pulling people into this idea of what would that look like for me? What do I need to do? Where does it start? It starts here. So what does it mean? And I think people are seeking it, craving it is really the term I'm using, and I'm going to stick with that because I think it's seeking, but like yearning for some of the more framed out and thoughtful leadership that we have had in the past.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because I'm thinking about your grandfather. It makes me start to think about my grandfather. And I think if we all did that exercise, we think about how leadership has changed across generations. You're talking about principled people that probably didn't ever do that value card exercise, right? That you and I are very familiar with, Jess. I loved it. I borrowed that and started adopting it and using it in our work. And it's really effective. It is in trend, in vogue now for people to be able to, what are my personal values?
Right.
And that generation may not have necessarily gone around talking about them, but they lived them. And they were convictions that clearly shaped their life and the way that they led. And I'm also hearing what you're saying around your observations for leadership is that for leaders, there's a real willingness to follow in a way. This idea of having a growth mindset and being coachable.
Yep.
Which makes sense, right? If they're working with you as a coach, that they've signed up to say, I know I need help in these areas. But honestly, that's huge for a leader to lead in a way that has the humility to say, leadership doesn't mean I have all the answers. I always have it together. Leadership is being willing and being vulnerable to say, I don't have this figured out. There is this area of growth for me that if I don't pay attention to this, I'm not going to be able to lead people well, and I'm not going to be able to flourish and thrive myself.
Yeah, agreed. And I know we've got lots of questions, but just to double down on that point and to give you a very concrete example of when I say people that I'm leading, companies I'm working with 3 legal associations statewide, 3 different states, and they've asked me to come in and do their leadership work. And we just added one earlier this week. And I can't think of a more, you get to, with this sort of like academia that's like, you walk into a room and you take over a room, right? And everybody just assumes you have all the answers. It's very, I don't want to say arrogant, but I think that's like the first thing you think of is like attorneys really have that gravitas. There's not a whole lot more you can tell me as I went through law school and I passed the bar and I'm doing all these amazing things for my community and for my clients. And so this is the group that you would think would not be pursuing leadership because you would imagine that they probably think they have this figured out. And this is the group that I'm serving because they understand that it's more than just your lived experience, that there does need to be some true understanding. I think leadership is the most underappreciated industry. I don't know if it's industry, but underappreciated, what do we call it? Area that we're focusing on. People just aren't focusing on it enough, yet everybody is seeking it. Yeah.
This talk about nostalgia, perfect segue to my next question, because this is a question that you and I just love to ask when we were interviewing mostly local nonprofit leaders, grassroots leaders in Durham, North Carolina, doing good work. If you could wave your magic wand over every leader you work with, what would be your biggest wish for them? And I think the implied nature of that is coming at that question from the opposite side of that first question, instead of, the assets of people who you're working with and like, how do you help make them shine? What are the things standing in their way that you'd love to be able to remove, whether that be internal to them or even just external, that is really an obstacle to their thriving?
I find that the people I work with have tremendous anxiety around feeling like they need to know everything. They just feel like if they're going to be in a leadership role, then they have to have all the answers. And they have to have at least 90% of the answers, right? And there's tremendous anxiety about not feeling equipped to lead. And that's just a big misnomer. In fact, if you think you know everything, then you're probably not going to be a great leader because you're not open to learning new things. You're not open to new ideas. You're not open to the vulnerability of being wrong, which you will be a lot of the time. And that's the biggest thing that I see. So the magic wand would be like, just chill out, calm down, take the back about 5 notches. It's okay. Like it's the idea that you're willing to go into the fire with your team or into the fire with your family or into the fire with your community. That's the gusto that you need to be a leader, not all of the 500 stacks of leadership principles and frameworks that live out there. I also think the other thing right now, if we're talking about in conditions where we are in our world, is you talked about a growth mindset. I do think that our leaders, if magic wand, need to understand that they now need to have a change mindset. They have to be able to be very resilient, not give up, push through. You got to go through a thing, not around a thing. And change mindset's a little bit different than growth mindset. Change mindset is being able to move quickly in crisis, move quickly in times of need. And that is a skill. And oftentimes, when you have to move that fast, people turn the other way. That's when you see who the real leaders are and what they can adapt.
Yeah, I want to drill down on that, Jess, because I know that you specialize in working with leaders who are at crossroads, at a place where you call them crucible moments, which I would assume is building off what you just said. It's needing to change. It's interesting what you just said, because leaders get to their positions because they've achieved.
Yeah.
But what you're also saying is they need to be vulnerable. They need to grow. They need to not know all the answers. They need to be willing to then think through, how do you move through this crucible moment and have the vulnerability and the openness to lead well through that without having all the answers. It's almost like leading in the gray. So I'm wondering what leaders need to navigate that well. We had a whole episode just recently on leading through flux and change. And this is what you're getting after too, crucible moments. What would you say is critical for a leader in those times?
Again, I think leadership is so fascinating. That's why I love this work, is because it feels very counterintuitive, right? You don't actually have to know everything. You can relax and sit with a moment. So I think the counterintuitive part here, the first thing that I think about with crucible moments and when I coach folks is slowing down. Like the idea of whizzing through a crucible moment is very sexy, very attractive. We want to get through it so we can get to the other side as fast as possible. So what is it going to take? And the opposite is often true. It's being able to slow that moment down and actually sit in the moment so that you can observe, spark your curiosity around what's going on. What do I need to do in this? How do I need to respond? Do I need to respond versus solving, getting to the finish line? And my partner says to me often, because I say this from a place of wanting to get to the other side of my crucible moments as quickly as possible. I am that person. And he often reminds me, he's like, the beauty of this moment is the questions. Like the work lives in the questions that you ask yourself, not the answer. Because if you're trying to prescribe getting to the end because you already know the answer, what might you be missing? The beautiful things, that's this new solutions, the creativity lives in the questions. And we are not practiced as in that way at all. I'm surrounded by people who do not practice this. It makes them very uncomfortable to ask those deep questions, to interrogate themselves and others in the way that we need to do that work. But yet, when we do, and we bring people in or we ask the hard questions, that's when cool solutions come up. And that's when we grow the fire, which is, if you unpack Crucible at a different time, but it's all about that heat and the fire. And you got to sit in it so that you can be something new.
Jess, do you have an example of someone, or a story you could tell of someone who sat in the fire well?
I do. I won't say her name, but I'll call her Kim, because that obviously isn't her name. But Kim worked in a broadcasting company that I am adjacent to. And she has multiple Emmys. If you look at her, if we did the Zoom call, in behind her would be a stack of Emmys. She, wildly respected, very good at her job, obviously. And she was feeling some tension. I'm not sure if I'm long for this anymore. She'd been there almost 30 years. Something was like, you could tell the change, the current was happening. And within just a few weeks, the organizational shifts, right? And the position is no longer there. And so she was let go. And it shocked everybody. It was like an earthquake over there. Holy smoke. If Kim is not there, who could, we're all on the line. And it was early days in my work, and she went through my beta of Reinvention Road Trip. And what I thought was so remarkable about her is that she had tied her work and her identity to herself. Like they were intrinsically tied, as you can imagine. She started as an intern and then became this incredible professional woman, executive. And so she was really in the fire. Who am I without this work? Who am I without these Emmys? Who will I be next week without being tied to this company? And what she did was exactly what I'm saying. She slowed herself down and it made her so uncomfortable. It reset her central nervous system. She was remarkably jittery, uncomfortable, had to force herself to go out and bathe in the trees and do all of this work with her dogs and take herself outside to find what's going on inside. This work took her about 6 months and she explored I call it the third door. So we often have what we know to be true and what we think we need to do next because the world says that's probably a good next step. And exploring the third door in a crucible moment is often the place where magic happens. And so she explored the third door. And it would be like, I think I'm going to breed German shepherds, or I think I'm like crazy ideas. It's cool, but so removed from what she was doing now. And just the concept that she could expand her mind. And I know the two of you, we talk about expansion, expanding her mind and making herself big again in this world and pulling her skills into a moment in a new way changed everything for her. Now she's happier than she ever has been. She's still exploring and experimenting with what's next, and she's comfortable with it. But it took her, now this has been for almost 4 years. So she's 3 years, 3.5 years working her way around this crucible moment. It doesn't happen overnight. But the better version of her is ours to enjoy because we get the benefit of this person versus the one who was like, I guess I'll just jump to the next thing because that's safe.
Hey, business leaders, are you and your team truly thriving? The Thrive Assessment from 1110 Leadership is designed to help you find out. This powerful 360 tool uncovers key leadership opportunities and challenges to help foster growth and help you build a thriving workplace culture. With insights into trust, health, relationships, impact, value, and engagement, you'll gain a clear understanding of where you stand and how to improve. But what sets the Thrive Assessment apart is the relational process. It's so much more than just an online survey. Our team walks with you through the results, providing support and coaching to help you and your team thrive together. Ready to take your leadership to the next level? Visit 1110leadership.com to learn more and start thriving today. We actually interviewed recently Jason Young, a local psychologist here based in Raleigh, who does these amazing retreats called Six Stones, where he just helps, honestly, a lot of them, our business leaders, go on this inner journey. And it feels like that would be a way of articulating kind of some of this work and how important it is for leaders to go through that third door. And that vehicle for him is these retreats and these peer groups that allow them to do that inner work. And Jess, I just think about, you can sense it, right? The leaders who have gone through that experience, they exist in a room differently.
Mm-hmm.
Their posture is different. They're rooted in something. They're really anchored, even though, and that oftentimes comes out when circumstantially stuff's hitting the fan all around and everyone's running around with their buckets. There's a calm about them.
Yeah.
Because they've done that identity work and they know I'm not on that roller coaster of circumstance. I know who I am.
Yeah.
I've embraced this idea of the question is more important than the answer. And so there's this steadiness, and it's so magnetic because you're just drawn. We all have people that we can think about that lead like that.
Yeah.
And it is so powerful. And yet we all have to do that for ourselves. We have to do that work. We can't just go read the book, whatever that looks like. You said bathe in the woods. I have follow-up questions about how that actually works practically, but that's for maybe another episode. Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll dig into it another time. So Jess, what I love about bringing you onto the podcast is we're really going to have a holistic conversation today, because not only for the way that you and I and our journeys have intersected previously, our past lives, but even the leadership coaching worlds that we all occupy. You also have been a part of one of our Just Leadership groups.
Yeah.
which is amazing to be able to be in that space together and wrestle through these conversations in a different format. I know I was blessed by being in those rooms with you. I'd love to just have you share with the listener, what was that experience like for you? How did it challenge you personally in your own leadership? Like when you think about your leadership, and then how do you think it's impacted your approach in your work coaching leaders?
Yeah. First of all, the program that I was in, the cohort that you all blessed me with, having the opportunity to just sit with it for 2 years was really remarkable because it felt like surprises around every corner. And when you're in a cohort experience, I don't know if you realize it, but when you sign up for cohort work, it is a surprise around every corner because you're in community with other folks, the two of you and then the women that we were in community with. And so the perspectives, it's this like amalgamation of just like worldviews every time we would get together that would find their way in the center of the questions that were being posed. And so I had no idea. You can't anticipate, you can't predict. You know what you're bringing to the table, but it's this anticipation of what's everybody else going to think about this or how do they view this, right? And in our particular group, I was the only Black woman, and lots of things. It's intersectionality, right? I'm a Black woman, but also from the Midwest. I'm also biracial. I also am a single mom. There's a million things I bring to a conversation outside of what you just see. And same for the other women in the group. And so that sort of intersectionality around the work, around justice work, and around leadership work, that's when you grow because you get to expand again the way in which you might have tackled an issue or tackled your point of view. All of a sudden, it's bigger and there's more options in this work. There's more ways to look at a problem, right? And so for me, that was the gift of it. The gift of it actually was the community and the rich conversations and the unique differences that we brought to the conversation that I wouldn't get otherwise. We did a lot of work on proximity. And I know that's one of the questions. How do you get proximate? This actually, yes, we're all middle class folks and we were in this, but that was proximate for me because I'm also was in a different city than most of these women. And that culture was different. So modeling what it really looks like to be proximate to each other and then expanding that what it looks like to be proximate to others in our community was one of the biggest takeaways. The other thing I want to mention about the program or the cohort work was this piece that you just said, Rob, around the calm in the storm, leadership being the calm in the storm. And there's something a little bit different about that person. They have self-awareness. And I think about it as like tetherball. And when I thought about our cohort, it was like we were all trying to find our center because we know the world. Remember kids playing tetherball outside and you hit the ball back and forth? That's the world. That's the world. They're batting it and they're going back and forth and we're trying to win and get the thing right. But the calm, centered, and anchored leader, the one who's principally mindset, understands that the greater purpose and everything is the pole, right? And we need to be that. And I think that was the goal for me is like, how do I stay strong and stalwart in my work? And like you said, in coaching others while this ball is swinging around me.
Yeah, it's just an encouragement for both Rob and me, Jess, to have you be a part of that, knowing that this is the work that you do and you modeled what it means to have a growth mindset and to share your story with us and the perspectives. And I love this idea that there's something new around every corner.
Mhm.
And we experienced that. And we really wrestled with what it looks like to be the righteous in this verse, Proverbs 11:10, when the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. And the righteous is that word, the sadakim, which is a Hebrew word that identifies people who use their power and their influence and steward it for God's peace and justice so that the whole city can rejoice. And so we really wrestled with that idea with the hope that we all could become the Sadakim, that we could be this group of people that when we have success, then this idea that everyone wins around us.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it in the context of business, which is a really interesting challenge for business leaders to think about. What does it mean to embrace this concept of being the Sadakim and have a broader vision for their leadership and their work so that they can impact their place, the places where they live, where they lead, the people that they serve. What would you say is the real challenge for business leaders to embrace that idea? We talked about the qualities of a just leader, seeing the whole playing field, building cultural competency, giving power away, and taking bold and courageous action. As you experienced the cohort, was there any one of those qualities that you felt like, man, this is a real doozy, particularly
for sure.
for business leaders and how we
Right.
embrace this vision?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could see it in our cohort as we would unpacking each of the qualities. There would be a collective, ooh, this one's tough. They're all tough, right? They're all tough because it requires you to do a lot of introspection. But certainly, I don't think this will surprise you that amplified the crescendo around toughness grew as we got to bold and creative, courageous action. And in business, it's true. It's easy in leadership to say a lot of things, be inspirational, say the things, bring somebody in for strategic planning session. This is what we're going to do, 3 to 5 year plan. This is our goals. These are our values. It sits on this mission. And we can do that all day. And if you're charming and have charisma, you can really, people will buy into that thing. The challenge is to put that thing to action, to be bold and courageous in truth. And I'm a real believer. I talk a lot about this. I write about this a lot. But the say-do ratio, this is basically what you're saying is it's integrity. It's we said a thing, now we have to do a thing. We said a thing, I'm going to hold you accountable to the thing. And that is where the rubber meets the road in leadership. It meets the road in business. It meets the road, and if we go all the way back to the beginning of this interview, around trust and establishing trust around a new creative vision. You want people to follow you, they need to trust you. The way they trust you is that they see that you have a high say-do ratio. Frankly, do you really do what you say you're going to do? And everybody's watching. And when you think they're not watching, they're watching. And if you think they're not watching, you're mistaken. Like you've missed the boat, because it takes a lot. And we look to our leaders to go a mile that we aren't sure we can go ourselves. We don't know that we have the water. We don't know that we have the fortification. We don't know that we have the will. We've never done it before. And so we're looking to you to show us that it can be done. And when leaders can do that and cross that extra mile, then I believe in myself that I can do it. And so it's instilling belief. So when we talk about work around justice, when we talk about justice work, when we talk about getting into spaces that are often unspoken, you really requires someone who can step in and not out of the circle. And that's few and far between. And that's the folks that I love to work with because I'm constantly inspired by that. It's a real interesting medal that they have.
Just you've worn a lot of hats in your career, and you've been in the nonprofit space, you've been in the business space, and now you're fully immersed in leadership coaching. You really possess this skill and savvy. I think David and I have witnessed this in person in various contexts, to be able to really traverse a lot of different spaces and be in a lot of different rooms with a lot of different folk. And I think when I first met you, you were maybe serving on 10 nonprofit boards at once,
Yeah,
which
it's like 9 actually.
I don't remember how. And I was like, I was blown away. I don't even know what that looks like. What?
Do not recommend. That's
Sure,
not
sure.
no, I recommend to you.
That's the tether ball spinning around the pole.
Ball.
Yeah, and you were realizing, hey, I need to, and you were in the process of trying to simplify for sure, because not trying to prescribe that to anyone. But I do think that revealed for you a real heart to navigate towards brokenness and say, how can I be of help? How can I show up in this space and leverage the things that I'm gifted at to help this organization? And obviously you were saying yes to that all over the place. And I think it comes from a place of you being really intentional around proximity. That P word, we talked about it all the time on the Just podcast.
Yeah.
We never did land Brian Stevenson as a guest, but it wasn't for lack of emailing brianstevenson@gmail.com and seeing if we got any bites. We never did. But hey, Brian, if you hear this episode, you're welcome to join us at any time. Still a mentor and hero of ours from afar. But I'd like that proximity piece, you mentioned it earlier. I think business leaders, oftentimes they have a picture in their head of what that looks like to do well, whatever quote unquote well looks like.
Yeah.
And there's so much guilt and shame of where they see themselves and where they think they should be. And I think our work oftentimes is really trying to help them understand what that looks like to get proximate. It could look a whole lot of different ways. It doesn't have to look like X, Y, and Z. Oftentimes they just have a fuzzy picture in their head, or they have the wrong picture in their head. And so I'd love to just have you speak to that a bit in your work with leaders, because we know that is really important. But also it feels like that's a term that maybe gets misdefined, and therefore people either they walk around feeling like they're just not doing it right, or they throw up their hands and say it's not even possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be proximate to challenges and issues. Is that the question? I just want to make sure I answer.
Yeah, I think in our work in the cohort, it was a lot of times we have this rule of life where we talk about we need to get close to brokenness, which is what Brian Stevenson talks about. Get close to issues of injustice. That could mean crossing lines of otherness that is ethnicity, is across socioeconomic, whatever. You talked about city otherness, right? Of like being in a space with people who just don't live in the same community as you and gaining a new perspective on life from that experience. And so it's so vast. I think take that in whatever direction you feel like you want to take it.
Yeah, people are just scared. Here's the thing. It's fear. It's driven by fear. Like, I'm not going to step into this room because I don't know what I'm about to face, or I don't know what I might who I'm going to have to talk to, and will we have anything in common? There's just like fear driven. And I appreciate you saying that I have this knack for proximity. And I want to be really clear that throughout my at least the last 15 years of my work, I was thrown, which is also where I want to throw it, to be clear about. I was thrown into spaces because my work required it. And I could have approached it with fear, but what I really was, I just approached it with excitement. I was excited. I didn't know anything about early stage startups, but that was the job. And so I had to be in proximity with, and I know this isn't the type of proximity we're talking about, it's the same idea. I had to be in spaces with founders that have very different worldviews than I had in some cases, or backgrounds. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what they were talking about. I needed a glossary of terms. I didn't know. Then I had to go into the nonprofit space in my community here in Durham and look at transitional housing, homelessness, and think about what it meant to be on a board for Prevent Child Abuse, right? And like these variety of things, all of which that I had a basic understanding, but I didn't know folks who were going through that. And what served me well was not approaching it with fear and trepidation, but being frankly hopeful and optimistic, like cliche after cliche. But if you walk in a room and your energy is like timid and closed, then the possibility of you learning a lot through that is pretty low, because you're going to want to have a posture of I know everything, or you're not listening. And so shut up, but be in these rooms, be quiet and learn, and have a spirit of that was cool, or that was interesting. I never thought of it that way. And all of a sudden, your network, your relationships, your community grows because there's a level of, okay, she didn't come here with this I know everything and I'm going to write a check on behalf of her corporation. She just doesn't, she's learning. And I think when you have a posture of learning, and you have a posture of optimism, which I don't see often as much as I'd like to these days. Everybody's so doomsday. But I do believe in hope, and I think it drives leadership. And I also think that's the fuel for proximate.
So good. Jes, we always end our episodes by giving our guests a chance to provide a bottom line. Would love for you.
Okay.
You've given a lot of bottom lines already, but if there was one bottom line that you would want to leave our listeners with, something to take with them that they don't want to forget, what would that be?
So I've got a quote that I like to use at times like this for conversations like this. And it's very simple. It's a Mary Oliver quote, one of my favorite poets. And it's a longer version of this poem, but it's Instructions for Living a Good Life is the name of the poem. And she just simply says, pay attention, be astonished, and then tell about it. And I think that's the good work. So pay attention to the world around you. Be astonished. Be prepared to be astonished. Don't think you know everything. And then when that astonishment washes over you, make sure you share it. Tell about it.
Wow.
Thank you, friend.
Wow.
You are a gift to us that keeps giving.
Thank you, guys.
And be the
What a
pole
pleasure.
and walk through the third door, right?
Third door,
I'm going to add 2 other bottom
others.
lines because there were so many. I had to say it. I can't leave with just one.
I can't wait. I can't wait to open my third door.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Always a joy. Thank you so much, Jess. This is
Appreciate you all.
wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Y'all are doing great work. I appreciate you so much. Thanks.
Thanks, friend. To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.